name is João dos Santos, and I am addressing you on behalf of the UNESCO Chair in Arts and Cultural Management, Cities and Creativity at the Polytechnic University of Leiria in Portugal. I would like to begin by expressing our gratitude for the invitation from the UNESCO Chair Forum University and Cultural Heritage at the Polytechnic University of Valencia, and by saluting all the participants. Unfortunately, neither I nor Ligia Afonso, the technical and scientific coordinator of the chair, were able to attend the Encuentro, but we were given this generous opportunity to make a video presentation. And before moving forward to the challenges of that video presentation, I just want to underline the fact that the Polytechnic University of Valencia is the place where I concluded my doctorate degree, so I'm really happy to be here, and I would be much more happy if I could be there with you. The challenge of making the video was to organize and edit it as a video report on a colloquium that took place last Friday, 6th June. This required us to use digital technologies such as YouTube and AI tools, as well as analog and more traditional technologies such as our memory and the notes we took during the colloquium, which, by the way, celebrated the 20th anniversary of the UNESCO Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. We call this colloquium 20 Years, Many Voices. This presentation summarizes the colloquium. The program, alongside more traditional academic formats, was also diverse. So it included catering provided by a special educational needs school employing over 150 young persons, a musical performance by an orchestra of basic and secondary school students, a drum parade, a class on traditional European dances, and a planetary music DJ set to close the event. The summary, which includes concluding remarks and future actions, is read by Cedric, a disembodied voice generated by AI. Thank you and enjoy the Encuentro.
Last Friday, 6th of June, we gathered at the School of Arts and Design of the Polytechnic University of Leiria to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the UNESCO 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. This colloquium brought together voices from around the world to celebrate, question, and reimagine the role of culture in our societies. Organized by the Polytechnic University of Leiria through its UNESCO Chair in Arts and Culture Management, Cities and Creativity, the LIDA, Laboratory for Research in Art and Design, and the Master's Degree in Cultural Management, this event was a collaborative effort. Key co-organizers included the UNESCO National Commission and GPAC, Office for Cultural Strategy, Planning, and Evaluation of the Portuguese Ministry of Culture. Partnerships with the Caldas da Rainha City Council, the Impulso Festival, and the National Arts Plan further reinforced this collaborative framework. Students from the Masters in Cultural Management also contributed directly to the event's programming through their pedagogical process of studying the convention and its topics. The UNESCO 2005 Convention is a fundamental international legal framework vital for safeguarding cultural diversity in an increasingly globalized world. It is founded on the principle that cultural diversity is a common heritage of humanity that must be valued and preserved. The Convention highlights how this diversity generates a rich and varied world that expands human choices and fosters sustainable development. Cultural activities, goods, and services hold both economic and cultural significance because they carry identities, values, and meanings, and thus should not be treated merely as commercial commodities. The principles enshrined in the Convention are deeply connected to fundamental human rights, such as freedom of thought, expression, creation, and participation in cultural life. Furthermore, the Convention explicitly positions culture as a powerful tool for democracy, tolerance, social justice, peace, and security, and underscores the importance of protecting endangered cultural expressions and respecting the traditional wisdom and knowledge systems of indigenous peoples. This colloquium was envisioned as a moment of live celebration, sharing, and reflection on cultural diversity. The program delved into numerous themes derived from the convention, including cultural expression as a human right, the role of education for diversity, culture for social cohesion, the plurality of identities, the free circulation of ideas and images, the concept of cultural democracy, artistic freedom, linguistic diversity, and the status of women in society. Through concerts, performances, presentations, talks, and debates, the colloquium aimed to examine the convention's relevance and challenges in the context of the profound changes that have shaped global cultural expressions over the past 2 decades. The involvement of students, many of whom are future cultural professionals, was particularly emphasized, highlighting the need for the convention's principles to be actively lived and applied in the practices of those shaping the future cultural landscape. Lourdes Camacho, General Director of GPAC and UNESCO's National Focal Point, reminded us that the 2005 convention is more urgent than ever. In times of polarization, forced migration, climate crisis, and democratic backsliding, reaffirming the right to cultural diversity is reaffirming human dignity itself. She underlined that culture is not a commodity, but a vector of democracy, social justice, and peace. Camacho called for these principles to be translated into public policies, funding mechanisms, and cultural strategies, both nationally and locally. She urged cultural professionals, especially the younger generation, to embody and apply these values in their work. She also emphasized the use of monitoring and implementation tools like the Quadrennial National Report to UNESCO to map diversity, identify good practices, and inform public policies to foster culture as a space of creative freedom, diversity, and democratic construction. Finally, she affirmed the importance of maintaining open spaces of dialogue like this colloquium, where different voices can intersect, challenge each other, and imagine futures collectively. Caldas da Rainha presented itself as a model of balance between tradition and innovation, with policies based on community dialogue, local craft valorization, and collaboration between cultural and educational sectors. Óbidos showed how books can build bridges between generations, creators, audiences, and the global and local communities. Initiatives like the Literary Village and independent publishing support networks reinforce the idea that access to reading is a right and a pillar of cultural citizenship. Leiria presented music as a transversal tool for urban development, social inclusion, and international dialogue, embracing musical diversity as a force of cohesion, interdisciplinarity, and innovation. The Creative Cities Network is a platform for real action, a driver of sustainable, inclusive, and participatory cultural ecosystems aligned with SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and SDG 4, Quality Education. Jade Nunes and Pedro Colasso embodied the young people involved in the Youth Addendum to the Porto Santo Charter. Young people are not only the future of culture, but its present. The youth-led discussion around the addendum to the Porto Santo Charter surfaced several critical issues. One of the deepest concerns is a fundamental confusion between cultural democratization and cultural democracy. Cultural democratization often implies a top-down approach where cultural institutions and elites decide what forms of culture are valuable and should be made accessible to the public. This can lead to a hierarchy in cultural values, where certain expressions are deemed more worthy than others. In contrast, cultural democracy advocates for a bottom-up approach, where all cultural expressions are valued equally, and everyone has the right to participate in cultural life as both creators and decision-makers. It emphasizes the importance of inclusivity and the need for cultural policies to reflect the diversity of the population. Cultural institutions, meanwhile, remain too closed, too uncomfortable, too unfamiliar, especially for young people. There's a lack of radical inclusivity. Marginalized voices are visible in the brochure, but invisible in decision-making. And when marginalized identities are not explicitly named in policies and laws, they risk being erased altogether. There are growing levels of self-censorship, driven by online abuse and offline threats, even in liberal democracies. Cultural workers face poor working conditions, while diverse communities still struggle to access municipal spaces and resources. Education isn't keeping up. Curricula don't reflect the cultural realities of today's youth, and digital technology, though fast evolving, is not always accessible or empowering for all. But change is possible, and the youth are leading it. The addendum calls for a real shift from cultural democratization to cultural democracy. That means ending hierarchies of value. That means putting marginalized voices, women, queer and trans people, Roma, Black and migrant communities, the neurodiverse, the stateless, at the heart of cultural policy. Inclusion must be structural, not symbolic. Institutions must open their doors. Culture must be recognized in all its forms, rural, popular, peripheral. Young people must not only participate, they must hold power, moderating, mediating, deciding. Cultural mediators play a key role in bridging generations, and working conditions for cultural labor must improve. Fair pay, real recognition. Above all, this addendum is a living document. It's made to evolve. Like culture itself, it must be revised, questioned, reshaped by the people who live it. Maria Acaso addressed the need to radically rethink visual culture. She warned of the unchecked spread of sexist and violent imagery, especially among youth. Visual education, she argued, must go beyond aesthetics and equip people with the critical tools to read, question, and resist images. She introduced the concept of visual sovereignty, the individual and collective power to choose, create, and refuse the images we consume, much like choosing a healthy diet. Acaso called for artistic education to become a space of political and ethical formation. Her proposals included introducing visual literacy into school curricula, fostering diverse image creation, and challenging media norms that center on white, heteronormative, binary bodies. Her message was clear. To transform the world, we must first transform the images that populate it. Only by creating new, diverse, fair, and critical representations can we imagine and build more equitable realities. The future of visual culture relies on our courage to educate, create, and resist through our gaze. Sverre Petersen, speaking on behalf of Free Muse, painted a concerning picture. Artistic freedom is under global threat. From censorship and online harassment to physical violence and political repression, artists face growing risks, even in so-called liberal democracies. He highlighted how far-right regimes often dismantle cultural infrastructure, restrict funding, and replace cultural leaders with politically loyal figures. At the same time, self-censorship, a subtle and insidious form of repression, is on the rise, quietly stifling dissent. Despite this, Sverre insisted, free art is not optional. It is a cornerstone of democratic societies. His call to action included legal reform, better protection for artists, cross-sector alliances, and cultural education that fosters critical resilience. Above all, he called on artists and allies to stand together, to speak out, to protect each other, and to persist in defending freedom of expression as a human right. And in a pragmatic way, help the whole by actively participating in the Universal Periodic Review (UPR) process at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, by submitting reports documenting violations and providing recommendations to countries to improve the situation for artists. Dr. Susan Keita-Metse, researcher, professor, and expert in African heritage and sustainable development, delivered a vital critique of how international cultural frameworks, including UNESCO's 2005 Convention on the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, often fail to respond to African realities. Her first key point, the persistence of colonial models of heritage conservation. Across the continent, sites like Mozambique Island and the Okavango Delta are recognized for their physical structures, while the living, communal, and intangible cultural expressions are sidelined or erased entirely. Secondly, Dr. Keita-Metse denounced the model of conservation without people. Too often, global heritage policies displace communities from their ancestral lands, disconnecting them from their cultural practices. In doing so, they violate the right to cultural expression and identity. A third critique, even the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 11 on sustainable cities, reflect urban, Eurocentric priorities. While these frameworks speak of infrastructure and safety, they overlook the reality that in Africa, sustainability is found in community life and indigenous knowledge systems. Her proposals for future action are clear and urgent. First, we must reform World Heritage criteria. UNESCO must value local knowledge systems, community narratives, and living cultural diversity on equal footing with tangible heritage. Second, we must reimagine education. African curriculums remain deeply shaped by colonial legacies. Traditional knowledge must be reintroduced into learning spaces, reconnecting schools with communities and heritage. Third, we must elevate memory as a tool of resistance. Even when people are displaced, memory, through oral history, shared practices, and cultural mapping, becomes a vessel for preserving knowledge. And finally, Dr. Keita-Metse calls for a new kind of cooperation between Africa and Europe, one based not on top-down models, but on mutual recognition of distinct knowledge systems. It is only through this horizontal exchange, acknowledging knowledges, that cultural policy can become truly global and truly just. Tristani Mundu's performance brought a powerful and unsettling presence to the colloquium, a performance that was less about entertainment and more about disruption, resistance, and reimagining how art can confront the structures that shape it. What we witnessed was not just a performance, but a deliberate act of friction. Tristani interrupted the formal flow of the event, challenged the space, and turned the tension between chaos and control into the raw material of the work. In doing so, the performance became a mirror to the invisible systems of authority that govern our expectations, of behavior, of art, of the body itself. At the heart of the piece were 3 microphones, each serving a distinct purpose: one for formal speech, one for questioning, and one for reaction. This structure raised profound questions. Who gets to speak with authority? Who is permitted to doubt? And who is left to simply respond? It made both visible and audible the discomfort provoked by using slang and non-standard language to prompt AI tools in the creation of a performance within an academic institutional setting. As we reflect on the 20 years Many Voices colloquium, one message resonates throughout. Cultural diversity is not merely a principle to be discussed. It is a living reality to be practiced, protected, and promoted in our institutions, our policies, and our everyday lives. The 2005 UNESCO Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions remains a vital international framework. It affirms that culture is more than commodity. It's the expression of identities, values, and meanings, essential to democracy, to human rights, and to peace. It is through culture that we nurture pluralism, deepen tolerance, and sustain the foundations of free and just societies. Across presentations, we saw that these principles must be applied both locally and globally. From the creative cities of Caldas da Rainha, Óbidos, and Leiria, to traditional dance projects like A Viagem, and from African heritage sites to digital youth activism, the convention came to life through lived examples. These stories prove that cultural expression thrives where institutions listen, adapt, and open their doors. We also heard a strong call to protect artistic freedom, freedom that is under growing threat even in liberal democracies. Censorship, violence, repression, and digital intimidation are realities that artists face, and self-censorship, hidden and corrosive, risks silencing voices before they are even heard. Defending free expression is not optional, it is urgent. The challenge of radical inclusion was another recurring theme. Cultural democracy must replace cultural hierarchy. We must name and welcome all identities: youth, LGBTQ+ communities, racialized groups, migrants, disabled people, indigenous peoples, not as symbolic gestures but as co-authors of the cultural future. Tokenism is not enough. Change must be structural. We also confront the reality that many cultural workers face poor conditions and lack recognition. They need fair pay, institutional support, and the right to create without fear. Cultural education must embrace local knowledge and value living heritage, not as museum pieces, but as evolving, powerful forms of expression. In Africa and beyond, indigenous knowledge systems must be integrated into heritage policy, challenging colonial models of conservation that have excluded people from their own histories. Digital media, social platforms, and AI are reshaping how culture is shared and who gets to participate. We must equip younger generations with critical tools to navigate these spaces, defend their voice, and claim their space. In conclusion, the 20th anniversary of the 2005 convention provides a timely and urgent opportunity to recognize and protect the diversity of cultural expressions and to actively promote them. This involves acknowledging the value of different voices, practices, and knowledge systems, and ensuring that these are reflected in our institutions, policies, and daily lives.